Hello and welcome to Diminishing Returns, part 2 of our Rambo extravaganza. What shall we call it? Rambo : Diminishing Part 2. Diminishing Returns, Second Blood, whatever. So, if you are a fan of the Rambo films and you've chosen to jump it straight in here, go back to last week's episode where we covered First Blood and Rambo : First Blood Part 2. And we discussed them in great detail with our special guest, Gareth Allen.
Hello.
So with Gareth, this week is me, Alan, and Sol.
Hello.
No preamble, really, this week. Let's just jump straight back in. We're following on from last week's episode. We're going to be talking straight away about Rambo 3. The least controversially titled film of this series.
Yeah. Last week we did a higher or lower game with the body count. So one person died in First Blood.
Mm-hmm.
A whopping 75 people were killed by Rambo in First Blood Part 2. So now...
How many killings?
How many people do you think
it's
John
got to be
Rambo
higher.
kills
It's
in
got to
Rambo
be higher.
3? Higher or lower?
I think it's hundreds.
Alan?
Which one's Rambo 3?
Oh, hang on a second, Sol. Let me clarify here. Is this that Rambo kills, or that including who the Russians kill?
No, how many people does Rambo kill?
Ah, okay. All right. Oh, gosh. Well, actually, I'm going to go lower then.
What happened in this one?
The Russians kill a lot of Afghan extras, but
Oh yeah.
but I don't think Rambo kills as many Russians.
Well, I'll go lower as well. Let's put a number on it. See who's closest. So we're
50.
going down from 75.
Well, I'll tell you
I'll go
right now, you're both
42.
wrong. It's higher.
Oh.
It is higher. It is higher than
Okay.
75. So now take a stab at how many you think it is.
Well, there weren't that many Russians. I'm going to say 100.
Wait, he does at one point have a anti-aircraft gun strapped to him or something, and he's just shooting people willy-nilly. So let's go with 123.
123. How many did you say, Gareth? 100?
100, yeah.
The correct answer is...
Oh, wait, I'll go 101.
You absolute prick.
The correct answer... Well, you were closer anyway. The correct answer is 115.
Ooh, 115 people. And that's just the ones he kills alone.
Yep. The vast majority of which he just shoots. They're not even particularly interesting deaths.
I tell you what, before we get into the detail of the film, can we talk about the killing? Because I know they don't really count. They were only Russians, but having watched, I watched these in the wrong order. So I watched First Blood, then the second one, then the fourth one, and then I watched this one last. And maybe I was jaded by the time I got to this, but it just felt like we've killed a lot of people along the way here. And it just felt, it was a little distasteful, I'll be honest. I had a similar feeling recently when I watched John Wick 2. I know we're not reviewing the John Wick films in this podcast, but the sort of stylized operatic dance of killing people, after a while, it just became, oh, these people are dead. And I know I know Mike Myers did this in Austin Powers, but these people have got families back in Russia. And I don't know. Maybe 4 films in a week is too many Rambo films to watch. But I was sick of the violence by the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This probably isn't the franchise for you then.
No, perhaps not.
Well,
Maybe I'm getting old.
I did notice, actually, this kind of distinction, certainly in the first film, where he doesn't just go around shooting people. He's like the silent assassin. He's got a knife. He's got the bow and arrow in the later films.
Yeah.
But then he will just grab a gun and shoot everyone. Because I thought at first they were trying to make a point, like he's not just guns are too easy, he kills with his hands kind of thing. But then he does just grab a gun and kill everybody.
I think it's just tactical. Once his cover is blown, then all guns blazing.
Maybe.
Yeah.
True. So, does anything happen in this film? I can't even remember.
Well, in the last film, he sorted out Vietnam, recovered the whole American reputation of Vietnam, and won that war retrospectively, despite the best efforts of the Soviet Union. So, having done that, in this film, he sorts out the Cold War and pushes the Soviet Union out of Afghanistan.
Yes.
Single-handed.
No.
Well, not single-handed, because he has Troutman with him.
Now, obviously, the big thing that we see immediately here is the Afghani rebels are on our side from our American point of view, Westernized point of view.
The Taliban?
The Taliban, yeah, the good old Afghani rebel freedom fighters.
Round of applause for the Taliban.
That is the thing that immediately jumps out, obviously, today when you watch it.
Yeah.
But can you tell us, Garrett, you know much more about this sort of thing. Why did the Russians want Afghanistan in the 80s?
Well, as with most of these things, there's an element of raw materials, but really it's just about expansion, and it's about controlling dangerous regions on your borders. So they wanted to control their southern border. If you go back, let's go back to the 19th century when you had empires. The Russians didn't like the fact that the British were in India and Afghanistan and on their southern border. And so later on, if you translate that to the Cold War, it was just a question of, if we don't get in there, the Americans will. So there were lots of wars, or small civil wars around the world in the 60s, 70s and 80s that were two sides just fighting for control of their country, that then became heavily funded by the Americans and the Soviets on each side. And so in places like, places like Angola, places like Vietnam, it was just a local conflict which became intractable because of all the money and weapons that were thrown into them. And I think Troutman explicitly says this in this film, but Afghanistan is seen as the Soviets' Vietnam. And that's because, as in with Vietnam, the Vietnamese were being funded by communists in China and the Soviet Union. In Afghanistan, the Americans were funding these mujahideen who, later on became very well-armed anti-Americans. But it really just is about ideological power politics.
So how does Rambo fix that situation? He's going to sort it out, isn't he?
Well, these brave freedom fighters are trying to overthrow the Soviet yoke. And don't we get a bit of exposition early on there? It's just in this one area. There's this one particularly bad Russian commander. He's really nasty. And we see some sequences of him being nasty.
And we can't even get Burkhoff to play him because you've already
done
that card.
Yeah, so if I looked this guy up because I didn't recognise him. He's a French actor, isn't he? I don't know him at all. But yeah, pound shot Burkhoff. So it's not that Rambo's going to go in and beat the Soviet Union, but he's going to go in and help these freedom fighters to overthrow the brutal yoke of the Soviets.
But does he overthrow the Soviet Union by the end?
Well, the Berlin Wall fell the next year, so draw your own conclusions, Alan.
Okay. Now, I watched these films quite recently, but this one definitely was not the one that stuck out in the memory. I made a note saying I'm 40 minutes in and nothing's happened yet.
Yeah.
They're doing some horse stunts just to fill the time. So what was that? How do we find Rambo in this film? I can't remember anything that happened at all.
Well, he's doing a stick fight, isn't he, at the start? That's how he's making his money. And then he goes back to a monastery. So he's living at a monastery, helping monks to build a monastery. And then Troutman turns up and fucks him up again. So in the second film, he's in prison and Troutman's offering him a way out. In this film, it's absolutely, he has got a good life. He's off the grid. He's hiding. He's trying to be who he wants to be. Troutman turns up with some CIA guy who's the baddie off of RoboCop. That's always a bad sign.
Smith, always nice to see him. Yeah,
Clarence Boddicker, and he says to him, well, I don't want to go. I'm quite happy here. Thank you very much. And Troutman, I can't remember what he said. Troutman says something like, "Well, you're a soldier, tough. Come on." and he makes him come. Ruins his life again.
Well, crucially, Rambo chooses not to go. He's found a life of peace.
Yeah.
So Troutman goes instead and gets himself caught, obviously. So then Rambo has to go. So it's kind of forced his hand.
He's got PTSD up to the eyeballs. He's building a frigging monastery, and now he's got to go to Afghanistan. Fuck's sake.
Have we lost Saul? He seems suspiciously quiet.
I've made one note of this about this film. It's they don't seem to know what inshallah means.
Do they just say it randomly? What?
They just look at each other a lot and go inshallah, inshallah. At the end they go inshallah, like it's some sort of like go with Christ or something. It means God willing. Yeah. You're meant to use it like you'd say touch wood. You're meant to be like, oh, have a safe trip, inshallah. You're not meant to just look at each other and go inshallah, inshallah. So
I'll be honest,
was very
I wasn't expecting the Islamic scholarship to come from Saul.
He's a big player in the Islamic film world. You know, he's.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
So yeah, that's my input for this film.
That's the only thing you know about this film.
Well, I watched it once ages ago, and I did rewatch it for this podcast, and I don't remember any of it.
That's exactly what I was just saying. Yeah,
it's just washed over me, and like water off a duck's back. I just.
Well, fortunately for you, I watched this film 4 hours ago. So recently, in fact, that I'm still angry.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I'll echo the sentiment. I don't like it.
So I did make another note here that I think probably relates to your problem with Inshallah, Sol. I put it's handy that these Afghanis speak such good English.
All of them. All the tribes people. No problem. Even the kid.
Not even a strong accent. Yeah.
Well, his main contact is played by a Greek actor.
I was going to say
called
what
Spiros. That is not a Pashtun name.
Well, I was wondering what the accent was in this film because I don't think.
Well, it's Greek. It's bloody Greek, is what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Because they sound Greek thinking about it. So yeah.
Okay, Gareth. It looks like you're going to have to take the lead.
Well, I mean, I can throw
Come
some trivia at you if you want.
Okay.
This was the most expensive film ever made at the time of its release.
Really?
Fuck off.
Is that just because of all the extras? Was it? Here's a question.
Budget of $63
Was it actually filmed
million?
in Afghanistan? Probably not, I'm guessing.
I doubt it. Let me look that up for you.
Well, Afghanistan was actually a war zone at the time, so yeah.
Well, First Blood Part 2, I believe, was filmed in Mexico, so I very much doubt this was filmed in the actual location. Let's see. This was filmed in Thailand.
Really?
The Buddhist monastery, was Thailand.
Okay.
Arizona,
Thailand,
California, Arizona, Israel. Oh, they did. Oh, there you go. They did some filming in Israel. Yeah. All right. That'll be most of the Middle Eastern bits, I take it. So part of the $63 million presumably went on Sylvester Stallone's salary for the film.
His cocaine bill.
Which was, he was partly paid with a Gulfstream jet.
Payment in kind. I hope he declared that.
To the cost of $12 million.
Is that like a tax dodge or something?
Yes.
Like if we pay you in Gulfstream jets, it's not classed as income. It's like a
maybe gift. I wonder. Yeah, maybe.
Absolutely.
Well, if he was gonna buy it anyway.
Maybe they've got connections in the.
I wonder if he was paid for the upcoming final Last Blood Rambo film in Amazon gift cards.
Okay, what else happened?
So Troutman's captured, and then Clarence Bodico off of RoboCop comes all the way back to Thailand to talk to Rambo. And he says, just as a courtesy, I thought I'd come and tell you Troutman's been captured. And walks off.
Yeah.
That seems like a long way to come. And so obviously Rambo decides he's going to go out of Afghanistan. And I did wonder about this. You know, obviously we know about Rambo that he is trained in all these different types of warfare and weaponry. But do you think he's ever fought in the desert before? And he's a jungle man, isn't he?
Yeah, it's a very different.
Well, it's a dry heat, isn't it? So it's a dry heat.
but, and to be honest, this might be the novelization of Rambo 2 that I'm remembering. But they do make a point of him being adaptable.
Oh, he's adaptable.
That's Troutman says. I told you, he's adaptable.
So we meet the Russian colonel, and I mean, he's a pound shot Burkhoff, and he's really bad. The acting's terrible. I mean, so bad he could be a Bond villain, really. We saw him in his lair, and I enjoyed the production design. He was interrogating Troutman. He had a chessboard set up in front of him. Oh, I see. Strategic thinker, eh?
What's his name? Bobby Fischer and who was the Russian one?
Spassky.
That's it. Yeah, it's all about the Cold War. Is all about chess.
There's a photograph of Lenin on the wall behind him, and he's got a chessboard in front of him, and it's like, oh god, could let's lay it on a bit thick here,
Well, he's Russian, and that's what they all do, isn't it?
And then Troutman gives him a lecture about how you people can't come here and treat these noble Afghan people like this, and they're a culture that go back thousands of years, and they'll see you off. It's a lecture that could have been delivered to Dick Cheney 20 years later.
Yeah, well.
The original director of this film, this might be partly why it was so expensive. Sorry, I'm just going to drop in with bits of trivia because I have nothing else to offer. The original director of this film was fired or replaced 2 weeks into filming.
Ooh. Oh god!
Due to creative differences.
Due to not doing as Sylvester Stallone told him.
Yeah, basically. The film also got through 3 cinematographers. So it sounds like there were production issues, and I bet you that's a big part of why the budget ended up being so high, because it's certainly not on the screen, is it?
No. So in the film now, we have I'm going to persevere with the plot.
Oh yeah, I've just remembered. Yeah, so he goes to Afghanistan. He starts playing like polo with them on their horses.
Bit of sheep dragging. Everybody loves a bit of sheep dragging.
Rambo's horse in this film was Indiana Jones' horse in Temple of Doom. There you go. Giving you the
thanks, Sol.
Not Temple of Doom. Last Crusade. There you go. Trivia.
Well, there's a really lengthy propaganda section here. So we see a hospital, and we see someone complaining about how the Russians drop these toy bombs that look like toys, and then we have this sort of village council where all the elders are talking, and they're laying it on thick about this noble tradition and how the Russians are trying to destroy it. Good old Taliban. Big round of applause for the Taliban. Amazing. And then there's a lovely bit of goat dragging, which everyone enjoys.
Yeah, that's how Rambo proves himself a man in front of all the other men.
Yeah, well, he asked Spiros what are the rules, and Spiros, who was obviously Greek and has no idea, says, I don't know, you pick up the goat and you put it in the hoop, I don't know. Although, to be fair, that makes more sense to me than American football, so... Yeah.
You love football.
But then we're rudely interrupted and the action starts. So presumably that informant has told them where this meeting is happening, and so the attack helicopters arrive and break up the party.
Yeah, my only note here is I have no idea what's going on. I've really phased out. So it's fair to say this film did not grasp my attention.
I feel like I've written too many notes here.
You're the only thing keeping us going, I think.
Well, I'll tell you what, this is interesting. This is the point where the little kid turns up.
Yeah. And
immediately he arrived on the screen, I wrote down, this kid is going to be a fucking liability. And sure enough, he was.
Yeah.
The kid asks him why he's going to rescue Troutman. Why you do this? And Rambo says, because he'd do it for me. And I've written down, no, he fucking wouldn't. He would do you for dead. This is the most abusive relationship I've ever seen.
Yeah, then he does go and rescue him. And I guess there's just a lot of action nonsense.
Yeah.
They end up in a trench, and they know they're going to die, but they thought, right, we'll kill as many people as we can going out, and then the rebels come and save them. I remember that bit.
One notable scene is where he cauterizes his wound, which I remembered that. Funnily enough, in my memory, that was in Rambo 2, but obviously I was wrong about that. So I think that scene is the only thing I remembered about this film, having seen it once 20 years ago.
Yeah,
and
it's quite a gruesome scene, but
yeah. So he opens up a bullet, puts the gunpowder into his wound, and sets fire to it. I mean, is that when do you learn how to do that?
Basic training.
But that's really the last note I've got before I wrote, "I'm so bored here. When will this be over?" So I'm with you, really. Shall we move on?
How does he kill the main bad guy? Do they have a face-to-face moment or something?
So Rambo's in a tank, and the bad guy's in his helicopter, and they have a head-on collision.
Okay.
Which Rambo survives. Here's a question for you. We were talking about is he experienced in the desert. When has John Rambo ever driven a tank before? When in his CV has that come up?
Drove one through Vietnam.
Hey, he was special ops trained, all right? They trained him in everything.
Well, he can fly a helicopter as well.
Yeah.
Well, we know that much, yes.
Ride a motorbike.
Well, I haven't got any more notes, so we can mercifully move on if you want to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember anything else about it. That's all. Shall we just rate it and then move on with our lives?
Yeah.
Shall I go first this time? So I'm going to give it 1, and I'll tell you why. Because it's rubbish, but one does seem particularly low. But I gave First Blood Part 2 a 3. and it's not even close to that good. So it's got to be 1.
Yeah. I think that's fair. Well, similarly, I've not gone nearly as severe, but I am going down lower than First Blood Part 2. So I give it a 4 out of 10. And to be honest, I think that's an incredibly generous 4.
I think so.
Yeah, I gave it 3 in similar terms.
It's awful. and I mean, that was the end of the franchise for a while.
Sorry, I've just thought of something else that I did notice while I was watching these films. No matter what Rambo's doing or if he's out in the jungle or whatever, he's always got that just 2 days of stubble on his chin, like someone's chewing a magnet and throwing iron filings at him. Kind of Desperate Dan style stubble.
The hair is pretty impressive, actually. When he's not got it tied up at the beginning and the end of this film, his locks are flowing. He looks like a shampoo advert.
So that was the end of Rambo. Bye-bye. We never saw him again until 20 years later. This was after he'd reinvented Rocky, right?
I believe the film was in production before Rocky Balboa had been released. So I think it was very much like, I'm going to revisit my old characters and go back to them.
Okay, here's a question, right? What happened in 2006 or whatever it was that meant Stallone A had the motivation to go and decide to rejuvenate his characters? Okay, that might be just because he'd had nothing else to do. But why were people paying for that?
See, I remember Stallone's first reinvention was Copland. And that was after the luster had gone off his star, and he came back and reinvented himself as an actor. And he got a lot of credit for that. But look, that was 1997. And I'm just looking on IMDb. He made a lot of crap between that and Rocky Balboa. So what happened?
Well, what year was The Expendables?
That was later. That was 2010.
Yeah, but I think that was kind of born out of this. I think
sure.
My guess is people who grew up in the 80s with these films were old enough to start capitalizing, for Hollywood to start capitalizing on nostalgia for 80s schlock, and so we started getting throwbacks to 1980s. Family Guy was big around this time as well. So, I just think it was 80s nostalgia. And we've kind of we're moving into a period of 90s nostalgia now. But
yeah, but this was Rocky Balboa particularly, and then Rambo as well. It was Stallone going back to the well. There can't have been any guarantees that was going to work. And certainly from a financier's point of view. Like, are you looking at a 60-year-old Rocky film? I guess for Rocky, it was like... for Rocky Balboa, it was a good concept. It was a nice script, and maybe they just sold it on that. But I think this Rambo film was made off the back of Rocky did well. Rocky Balboa did well, so...
Well, no, apparently it was in production, certainly greenlit and sold before that film came out.
Really? Yeah.
But maybe they... Yeah, apparently. Maybe they'd seen trailers and buzz for Rocky Balboa and were predicting how well it was going to do. But, Rambo, it's a big, well-known franchise. You could make money on Rambo movies till the end of time if you wanted to. It's a bit, as long as you're not silly with it. I don't think it was an expensive film.
I guess
it doesn't feel expensive.
The budget was apparently 50 million, which isn't cheap, but I think that's probably a pretty sound investment just for a bit of nostalgia. The Rambo movies are fondly remembered.
You're presumably they're filming in Thailand or somewhere. It's probably pretty cheap. You've got no other actors to pay for apart from Stallone. He's directing it himself, so he's probably taking a pay cut on that, as a package deal. Yeah, presumably he's producing it as well.
He's probably got some kind of profit point deal.
Yeah. I think he'll be a producer, won't he? That's where he'll be making his money. But as a director and actor, I suppose you can do it relatively cheaply. Put all the money into your effects.
Yeah.
So that raises the question: where the hell is the Tango and Cash reboot?
The title here, Rambo, can partly be explained with the connection to Rocky. Because obviously that Rocky Balboa was intended as the final Rocky movie, so they called it Rocky Balboa to just kind of separate it, make it stand out from the other films, Rocky 1 through 5.
Just a blatant disregard for numbering conventions. The Rocky series had been all right until that point.
And so off the back of that, this film was originally called John Rambo. Which I think was just a working title. And apparently Stallone didn't like that because he felt it signalled that this was the final Rambo film, which apparently was never his intention. So they changed it from John Rambo to Rambo, which I would argue is more of a final name if you...
So let's catch up with Rambo then. It's 20 years later. He has been living in the jungles of Myanmar for all that time, basically, just kind of eking out a living.
He's in Thailand, Alan. He's over the border from Myanmar, yes.
Of course, he won't be hanging out in Myanmar, would he? Yeah, of course. But the very opening of the film is showing us the sort of shenanigans that are going on.
Yeah.
Yeah, it feels like a lecture.
Yeah, so just continuing our higher or lower game.
Higher.
You are correct. Rambo kills more people in this film than he killed in Rambo 3. How many people do you think Rambo kills in this film?
200. 250.
280.
I'm going to give it to Gareth. Incredibly close. 254.
Oh, that's good.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, but so we get this little opening sequence, which is basically just look at the bad men, aren't they bad? And we see them gambling on prisoners' lives and raiding villages. Yeah. And immediately there's a lot of blood. So we're going to see a lot of gore and blood in this film.
What you were saying about feeling that Rambo 3 was too violent and it was just unpleasant. I mean, this is a fucking snuff film. It's just...
Yes.
Apparently, this film averages 2.59 killings per minute. but beyond that, it's not done with a campy 80s. It doesn't feel like a cartoon. It's done realistically enough that it's really very unpleasant.
Very hard.
I'd like to. Well, that's it. I'd like to speak in defense of Rambo here, the film, not the person, because I think that the first scene where we get really bad violence, where they attack the village where the white Christians have gone, and they come and attack that village and really rip it apart and kill most people and all this. I thought it was very extreme, but I think it was deliberately like horrible and aggressive to show. Yeah, really, it's like, you know, Spielberg did it in Saving Private Ryan, and they gave him an Oscar. But in this one, it felt like it was setting the scene for this thing. I will argue that later on in the film, it does become just movie violence for kind of gross sake. But that first scene, I think, just sets up the tone of it really nicely, and is a very kind of harsh slap in the face, saying, "Look, violence in films is all fun and games, but like this is some real shit going on."
Yeah, I agree. Except if that's what you're going to do, the whole film has to be about violence and war being bad, and you can't then in the third act get into, oh yeah, look at this fucking crossbow stabbing this guy in the face. Oh yeah, Stallone, yeah, he cut his guts out. Look at his guts rolling out. Right. Yeah, he's blowing him up. The head come off. Look at that. Yeah. This is such a fucking gorehound movie. And it completely undermines any artistic integrity that it is clearly trying to show the horrors of war. And it completely undercuts itself. And it's one of many reasons why I think this film is fucking bullshit. Because we should add, this film, it didn't do that well critically, but it went down very well with audiences. It was seen as similar to Rocky Balboa, it was seen as a real kind of successful nostalgic revival. It was seen as a really great throwback to those old 80s movies, but one that had something to say. It has a 7 on IMDb still, which is a good score. I fuck this film.
I
think ethically it's wrong.
Well, I don't disagree with that, Sol. But I think if we, like I say, I'm sick of the blood. But just looking at it as a film, I wrote down after about 3/4 of the way through, I've written, nothing about this is unpredictable, and every single character, as soon as they open their mouth, you know what their arc's going to be. They're all absolutely cookie cutter.
What, even Graham McTavish?
Vinnie Jones. I called him Vinnie Jones throughout because they obviously couldn't afford him. But seriously, you know, as soon as anyone said a line, you're like, right, okay, I know what this guy's going to do. I know what his pattern's going to be. He's going to end up turning on him, and then he's going to be good in the end, and he'll probably die just after saving him. Very predictable.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so what happens is some American
Christian missionaries, yeah, they knock on Rambo's door. Talk about white savior complex.
Yeah.
Actually, originally this film, at one point when it was being developed, was going to be about Rambo going into Iraq, which was obviously a current conflict when it was produced. And Stallone put his foot down and said nope, because he felt that would be disrespectful to the troops to imply that one guy could just swan in there and like save the day when so many soldiers were trying. So instead he just put it in Myanmar and implied that one guy could swan in there and save the day, and it was fine. Because they're not white, they're not Americans, so it doesn't count.
Yeah. Well, the leader of the missionaries is obviously a prick from the first moment. And then you've got Julie Benz, who in my head is Dexter's girlfriend.
Julie Benz, she is TV royalty. She was Darla, who was a very significant character in Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel, and then she went on to be Rita, Dexter's girlfriend. Which is why apparently Stallone cast her, because he was a big fan of Dexter. Apparently,
I also recently saw Julie Benz in Boondock Saints 2, but I watched by accident.
Well, funnily enough, I tried to watch Dexter, got a few episodes in and gave up because the acting was all terrible.
No, John Lithgow's in season 4.
I like Dexter. I'm not gonna. I can't defend that, but I'd like Dexter. Stick with it.
No.
Dexter, season 2 of Dexter's great. But it's all downhill from there because they kind of everything reaches boiling point, and they spend the rest of the show trying to recapture it, and they can't because they've already hit boiling point. But I like it too. Worst finale I've ever seen to a TV show. Anyway,
I wanted to ask about this white savior thing because I couldn't figure out where this film stood on these missionaries.
Yeah.
Were they being portrayed as kind of foolish or good-hearted,
or commendable,
but naive, or
yes, naive,
selfish?
Not bad people, naive.
I think, yeah.
Because it really, I mean, when that village gets attacked, it's because they're there. You know, they're cutting off the arms because they've been giving them injections. You know, it's like they're... And the film never quite explicitly states that. It could just be a random attack, but it's certainly implied.
Yeah.
And I think that's the idea.
Yeah.
But
It seems amazing that God didn't protect them.
he did. He sent Rambo. He sent his... Yeah. The Julie Benz character, as a woman, is the one that Rambo can relate to in some way, I guess. I don't know why.
I don't really get that either. I think there's an element of, you know, like we said with the kid, it's like he's protecting her. But what, you know, he doesn't seem to care about the other missionaries.
No, he definitely doesn't. Certainly not in the same way. We've got a ragtag bunch of mercenaries that come to save them, and Rambo gets stuck with them.
That's quite funny on the boat where the British guy's mouthing off, and Rambo just sits there quietly like the living personification of PTSD that he is.
Yeah, the Graham McTavish character is broad.
I like him. He's a complex character.
I mean, he's one of the most entertaining parts of the film.
That's true.
That's something I must say. The level of filmmaking on show is such a step up from the previous two films, First Blood Part 2 and Rambo 3. It's a much better made film, and it's far, far more entertaining just to sit through on a purely like mindless level. Most of my issues with it come down to like ethics and things. So I kind of understand how this is often seen as a good sequel and the one sequel that, you know, stands up and blah 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 blah. And yeah, he's part of that, Graham McTavish, because it's fun just to watch him walk around going, "You fucking muppets! What the fuck is this, you stupid cunt?"
So we get down to business, and they... Oh, well, first of all, they all think Rambo's just a boatman. I don't know, and there's a lot of that. They're like, "Oh, you can't come with us, you're the boatman." And
boatman stays with the boat.
Which does make sense. I mean, there is a logic there. But obviously Rambo turns up. He kills people with a bow and arrow.
Now, there's a massive confrontation between him and Vinnie Jones, and he holds the bow and arrow right up into his eye, and then just like that, he's in charge.
Yeah.
They all go, "All right, fair enough, the boatman's all right, we'll follow him."
Not like as soon as he turns around, just shoot him in the back of the head.
No.
I think, but your Graham McTavish character, he seems like a reasonable fella. He's obviously just gone, "Oh, well, I've been bested here."
Yes, fair enough. Law of the jungle, innit?
Yeah, there feels like there should be... We don't get the moment there where he kind of wins their respect. Like, because even when he comes in and starts killing people, they're like, "Why the fuck have you killed everybody? Now they're going to come and kill us. All their mates are going to come and get us." So we never quite get that moment, I suppose, which is maybe what it needed. They go... So the big thing is they go into the village, or whatever it is, and you do your little heist where they go and save the people that are there. They've got all the ingredients there, running around in quiet. There's a distraction to keeping all the troops busy. You've got the evil general who not only is a horrible murderer, he's also a bit gay. So that's even worse. And then these guys are supposed to have been there for like at least 10 days by that point. The prisoners, the hostages, I guess. What are they intending to do with them? Are they hostages or what? Why are they keeping them?
I don't know. I don't think that's ever clear, really. Are they wanting to ransom them, or I don't know.
All this is leading up to set up a scene where there's hundreds of people at the bottom of a hill, and Rambo with a massive gun on the top of a hill. And then there's about 20 minutes of him shooting people.
And I was expecting Dexter's girlfriend to come good. She is useless in a firefight. Just sits there with her fingers in her ears.
What about her fiance, who is like really pacifist? Even when Rambo shoots some people to save their lives, he's still like, "Oh, you shouldn't have done that. That's bad. We could have like prayed them away.
Should have just winged them."
Yeah, and then obviously he beats someone's head in with a rock. That's his character arc done.
It's a nice story of redemption, isn't it?
So, a quick question. While Rambo's been living in the jungle for 20 years or whatever, at what point did he find the time to have a facelift?
Now, Alan, it's funny you should say that, because I've written the note early on. Missionaries arrive. Leader Michael is obviously a prick. Everyone too polite to mention his face.
Isn't that from the torture? They like put some frog venom in his face or something when they were captured. My viewing experience was that this film was much better than I remembered, actually quite entertaining. Mm-hmm. And then the extraction mission begins, where Rambo goes back in with Graham McTavish and everyone, and then it becomes as boring as I remembered it being, and that is the bulk of the film. So it actually is quite boring. So yeah, jump to the end.
Well, so right at the end, we get a little bit earlier on where Rambo's sort of saying how he hasn't been home for so many years and he doesn't know, like, what even if his dad's still alive, blah, blah. So then right at the end, we kind of jump from this end of the action sequence, just cut to he is, like, on a farm in Iowa or whatever he's from.
Yeah, and there's very little setup for that, is there, really? It feels like...
It was a line, and you're right, Alan. An hour and a quarter earlier, there was a line, I don't know, a dad maybe. That was it.
Yeah.
That's the only setup we had for that.
And it's annoying because people acted like this was a real full circle, wonderful finale to the film. He comes back to the farm. No, it's just like a fucking nubbin on the end of the film. There's nothing to do with it. It's
epilogue.
Plus, my problem with that is, and like, let's compare and contrast this again to Rocky Balboa, which is all about this guy who is now too old for this shit. Whereas in Rambo, it feels like this character could be 32 and it wouldn't make any difference. Like, it feels like we're not acknowledging his age, but also not acknowledging, like, the life that comes with that.
Well,
and
also...
the fact that he's, going home to see his dad, like, as if he's been away for 2 years, not 25 or whatever it is.
Where it also pretty much stops First Blood making any sense, doesn't it? If he could have gone to this farm and hung out with his dad
and got away from everyone,
then why was he drifting around? And
maybe they had an argument.
Just seems a bit weird.
There's nothing about him, like, perhaps, oh, I wish I'd had a family, or I've never had kids, or like any of that sort of thing that you might expect to find of someone of that age. But then no acknowledgement that he doesn't need that either, or that he's happy in his boat life, or I don't know, just nothing really. It's just not much in terms of character, is there?
No, it's just about the violence. The whole film's just about violence.
It was quite fun to watch, though.
Too much.
Okay, well, do you want to rate that then?
Well, I've sort of boxed myself into a corner here, haven't I, with giving the 3 to the second film. But I think it's better than First Blood Part 2.
Yeah.
So, but I'm going to give it a 4. Okay. I agree with what Saul said a minute ago, actually. The first half hour is okay, and then it just becomes really boring. Just becomes a gory shoot 'em up.
And I don't know why that is, but I do think up until when he is just taking the missionaries in there, I don't know, it's fairly engaging. It's not too bad. I think it's because up until that point, the idea that war is hell and violence is horrible works. It's like it becomes a different film when it becomes a reconnaissance mission, when it becomes about saving the missionaries who are still alive. That's when it just becomes a throwback to these 1980s nonsense movies and it becomes a cartoon, and it's just boring, and it undermines everything that the film was presumably trying to be. So I give it a 4 out of 10. It's not great.
I just found it generally more entertaining and easier to watch than the last couple. So on that basis, I gave it a 6.
Yeah, fair enough. Apparently this film's banned in Myanmar. Can't say it. I wonder why that is.
Well, if I could just finish by recommending The Boondock Saints 2 All Saints Day to our listeners, because Julie Benz plays a sexy FBI agent, and it's really the performance of a lifetime.
What, better than Gary Oldman in Twinkle Toes?
Well, I think the Academy are on standby.
So there's a new one coming out. That's why we're doing this.
Yeah. So what's that about? Why? I mean, I don't mean what is it about. I mean, why is that happening?
I think it's been intended for a long while. I think the intention was, as I say, Rambo 4 wasn't intended as the end of the series, and it was immediately afterwards in 2009 that Stallone announced that they were making Rambo 5 The Savage Hunt, which I am gutted never got made, because do you know about this film?
No.
The original plan for Rambo 5?
No, go on.
No.
So I think they bought the rights to a book called Hunter by James Byron Huggins. But basically, it's about like a mutant human soldier that gets loose in the woods, and then they get Rambo to go in and hunt it down. So it's going to be Rambo versus a mutant.
Mm-hmm.
They were saying, yeah, it's more like the first film. It's a nice small, bringing it back to the basics of the first film. I mean, there's a sci-fi element, but Stallone didn't seem to think that was a problem. So I'm gutted. I would have loved to see Rambo against the mutant monster.
Rambo versus Predator. Why are we even talking about this? Rambo versus Predator.
Oh my god, it would be amazing. It would be amazing. And someone wisely along the way said, you can't do that. That's ridiculous. You idiot. Last I heard, Stallone had signed on to make a film adaptation of the book that isn't a Rambo movie. It's just a straight up him versus the monster. So, assuming that does ever get made, I'll just watch it and pretend it's Rambo in my head, and it'll be great.
Yeah, why not?
Anyway, I mean, there are all sorts of ideas. I think The Expendables kind of took Stallone's attention away from making these sorts of films for a while. There was talk of it being a kind of Unforgiven-esque old man Logan kind of thing. There was talk of it being a kind of passing of the torch film. At one point, they even announced there was going to be a Rambo TV series about, like, Son of Rambo or something, which I think is still in production, but I think Stallone was kind of not very happy about it. It was being done without his involvement. And somewhere along the line, they landed on doing it about Rambo versus a Mexican drug cartel, which was originally an idea for Rambo 4. One of the ideas they were going to do in Rambo 4 was him going in to save a kidnapped girl from Mexican drug lords. But Stallone said it didn't feel quite like a Rambo film, quite like a Rambo idea. So, yeah, whatever this film is, it is about him going up against the Mexicans. So,
yeah.
And we're finally here. It's nearly out with very little fanfare. The trailers have only just started coming out.
I must admit, Sol, that until you asked me, watch the Rambo films, let's talk about them, I didn't even know there was a new one coming out.
I'm kind of looking forward to this film. Stallone seems to have got a good grip on his franchises now with Creed and Creed 2 and Rocky Balboa and, plus him versus the Mexican drug cartel. That's, I don't know, inherently that just feels like it's going to be a bit smaller scale than the last few films. It's going to be a bit more close to the kind of conflict of the first film. At the same time, I can't see it being good. So I don't know what to think.
Do you think they'll acknowledge his age? That he's in his 70s now?
Oh,
Well, it's called Rambo Last Blood. I do think it's going to have to be a kind of...
Will he die at the end?
This is the end of this. I don't know. Maybe.
No, I don't think he will, because Stallone will always want to keep his options open.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think he will, but he might.
If you had a chance to make a Rambo film, what would be your perfect era to do it? Where would you put your film?
1983, 1984, 1985. Before
Immediately
Rambo...
after the first one.
Yeah, ignore all the other sequels. Let's try and get that right. Although the thing is, like we said last week, I don't think you can make a good sequel to First Blood. I don't think you can capture what that film is in another story. It's self-contained.
Well, I'll tell you what I'd do. Prison Break film.
Ooh.
They throw him in prison, then he escapes, and they have to try and catch him in the woods.
Oh, fuck. That'd be good. I'd like that.
Yeah,
It could be more of the same, but yeah, him in prison and the guards. Oh, yeah, that could be really cool.
Well, obviously, you'd have to set it up that the guards were all corrupt and they were being really nasty and stuff. It wasn't just that he'd broken out of prison. He had to get out to save a child or something.
I mean, that's much better than my idea, which is Rambo in Jurassic Park. So
I was thinking you go the Rocky Balboa route and have an aging Rambo running a hostel for young soldiers coming back from Afghanistan who have got PTSD.
Yeah.
And
young black
much hilarity ensues. One of them gets in trouble and Rambo has to tool up to go and save his boy.
I like, if you're going to do it now, Rambo like in an old folks' home. But one of those really shit ones in America that they have for veterans, but it's like nobody's really giving any money to them.
what? And he has to break out of the old folks' home.
No, he just sits there and like someone feeds him soup. It's not funny. It's just
that's the whole film.
It's just a tragic end to a tragic figure.
I mean, you could just do Battle of the Johns. This is something Calvin would probably have pitched if we'd done this several years ago. John Wick versus John Rambo versus John Travolta.
John Goodman.
No, John Goodman's like the Nick Fury who brings them all together. He's like the head of the John organization. John Adams and John Quincy Adams. John Malkovich.
John Lithgow.
This could go on for a while. Yeah. I mean, I think if anything, we've established that you just really shouldn't have done a sequel to First Blood, Stallone. So bad, naughty Stallone.
So that's it for Rambo for now. We will be looking at Rambo Last Blood, or whatever it's called. Sol and I will do a little review of that on a Diminisode. If you want access to the Diminisodes as they go out, you need to become a Patreon. And you can become a Patreon at patreon.com/dimreturns. It is just $1 a month. I mean, what can you get for $1 a month, eh? Nothing, except good entertainment from other podcasts.
Not for $1.
No.
You'd be looking at a good $5 a month, I think, for your average podcast. Yeah.
Yes. Diminishing Returns, reassuringly cheap.
Yeah.
Yes. So you can do that. We will be covering that at some point.
Yeah.
In the near
Hey, and
future.
we've got like 30 Diminisodes up already for you to go and binge, plus 2 full-length episodes. So special exclusive episodes. So
What's next week, Sol?
Next week, shall I give you a clue, Alan?
Yeah.
Did it?